I am Reverend Dr. Frank A. Thomas. It is my exciting privilege to bring to you another version of the African American Legacy Preaching Series here at Princeton Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana. We bring you the brightest and the best of the African American preaching tradition as we talk preaching, we explore preaching, and as my very special guest, I have Pastor Tisha Dixon-Williams. She is the pastor of
the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton.
The First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton.
In Bridgehampton, New York.
In Bridgehampton, New York. So
yes.
Forgive me for screwing that up.
You didn't screw it up.
Okay.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. So let me say welcome to the African American Preaching Legacy Series. It is exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. It is more exciting for me to be here. I'm trying not to fangirl out. I took little footage as I walked into the chapel and said, this is where all the magic happens. So this is it's a check on my list of, I have what I call a 50-50-50 list, 50 things I want to do, 50 places I want to go, and 50 things I want to be. And so you've allowed me to check one more thing off my 50-50-50 list. And so thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, we are honored to have you. We're honored to have you. So obviously you're growing, in the preaching world, we're saying you're blowing up, right? And so, you've had so many fabulous doors open to you now. For those who don't know you, or what would you like for them to know about you?
Sure. The first thing I think I'd like everyone to know about me is that I'm the youngest of 4 children to Edward and Muriel Dixon. My mom is a Brooklyn-born native. My dad is a Gullah-born black cowboy. And so, hence the hats and the Western gear. I know people might think I'm inspired by a certain pop artist, but I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. So I think that's the most important thing I want people to know, that I'm and as much as I am city, I'm also country. I'm a city and a country mouse. My parents made sure of that we understood our city heritage and our Gullah Geechee culture. And so we were truly raised in both. And so I think that's what I want people to know about. I am a hip hop aficionado, I love all things pop culture. I'm a super nerd. And I'm just as comfortable on a Brooklyn stoop as I am on a Georgia porch. And wow. I think that's what I want people to know about me.
That is amazing. So for those parts of the audience that don't know much about Gullah culture, yes. Why don't you give us just a brief, I don't say explanation, that's not the right word, but help us to understand that part of your life.
Sure. So the Gullah culture is comprised of descendants of slaves who came to America and sort of landed on the southern East Coast. And so you have your North Carolinas, your South Carolinas, and your Georgias. My family is from a little island called Sapelo Island, Georgia, one of the last existing Gullah Geechee communities that are here. And so that was my childhood, growing up on rice and indigo and all of the beautiful things and different herbs, and learning how to heal from whatever you had in the kitchen, and song and rhythm. All of those things are a huge part of who I am. And certainly that Gullah Geechee dialect, which I don't have, but my dad had till the day he died. Right. And so all of that has certainly been enriching to me in my life.
So how would you say that aspect or that part of your life is in your preaching?
Oh, we're starting already, huh?
Yeah,
we're in it now. We're in the thick of it. So for me, I think one of the things that I always want to do in my preaching is honor authenticity, and to always bring who I am to the preaching moment. I think that's any preacher's greatest superpower. Beyond education, beyond understanding and reading, who you are can inform the preaching moment in a great way if you allow it to, and help other people. So I always, in the back of my mind, want to make sure that my family is proud of me. My dad passed, it'll be 2 years in June, and I think my greatest goal now is to make sure he's proud of me, that he sees everything that I'm doing. And so bringing my culture into that matters. I recently, for Black History Month, my sermon series was The Gospel According to Gullah. And so I preached a series of sermons from the New Testament Gullah Bible. My favorite one of the series was We Ain't Been Forgot, that God still remembers us and walks with us. And I think every time I'm able to do that, I get really excited and happy.
So we're going to zoom back out for a moment before we zoom back in on that. So tell me about your background that led to a call.
Wow. So this is where it gets interesting. I was never supposed to be here. I was never supposed to be doing this. Quite honestly, I was supposed to be an EGOT by now. I was supposed to have an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. I was supposed to be, hanging with Viola Davis and Whoopi Goldberg and them. This was not part of my plan. I grew up in the arts. I grew up a theater kid. And I even went to a high school that, as opposed to having teams, we had a really robust theater group. My high school, Edward R. Murrow High School in Brooklyn, we had 3 theaters. So you know how most schools have 3 stadiums or 3 fields? No, we had theaters. And so in high school, I got bit by the acting bug. Let me just say I have always been incredibly creative and have always had a huge imagination. My parents can tell you stories. I could take anything and create a story from it or repurpose it. That is always who I was as a child. And so theater always appealed to me. Acting appealed to me. How story and art could transform lives has always appealed to me. And so when I got in school, I really got bit by the acting bug. And my first play, I played Beneatha Younger, the daughter in A Raisin in the Sun. And this was a major production. It ran for weeks in my high school. People came from the community. And I remember the biggest compliment I received was from one of my teachers, who came to me and said, your performance was Broadway level. If they were auditioning now, I would encourage you to audition for the role on Broadway. And that meant something to me. I was completely immersed in these characters and in these roles, and I absolutely loved it. And I feel like I bring that to the preaching moment. That has always been part of my call. I have a friend who says, nothing is wasted in God's economy. And that is very true. So I've learned in the preaching moment to pull from all of those aspects of my life. God said, you're going to tell a story. You're just going to tell my story. And so part of what I do is find creative and dynamic, artful ways of telling that story. Even pageantry. Pageantry has taught me to smile and wave, even when I don't feel like it. It's taught me to be a good sport. It's taught me to think on my feet. I recently preached in Chicago during the DNC, and my acting teacher was there. I did not know he was coming, but he taught me in Harlem when I was part of a theater group, and he came. And after I preached, he came to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, you validate me. And he said, I knew you were going to preach well when I saw you ground. And it was like, oh, she grounded. And even before that, I realized so much of the acting world I bring with me, how to project, how to break the fourth wall if necessary, how to communicate a story, how to dive into a biblical personality. Acting has informed so much of this. And so I would say for every preacher, take at least one improv class.
Wow.
It will help your preaching. Wow. Take at least one improvisational class. It will help you.
Right. So complete the journey from theater to the pulpit.
So theater to the pulpit, I decided I needed to grow up. I was tired of auditioning and all the things that come with that life. And so I got a regular job. I started working. I started my own company. I did all these things. And then I went to a church called First Calvary Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York. I was invited by a friend to go on Family and Friends Day. And she didn't believe that I was coming, and I showed up. And when I saw and heard Reverend Earl Jones Sr., who was my pastor, I said, this is the place for me. I didn't want to be in a mega church. It was important for me to be in a church where if I wasn't there, I'd be missed. Yeah. Where I had a relationship with my pastor. I grew up in St. Anthony Baptist Church with Reverend Booker T. McCullough was the pastor. And so I grew up in a way where I trusted pastors. I've always had great relationships with my pastors, and I always come from pastor-led churches. And so I was baptized at St. Anthony when I was 9 years old. Okay. Because as a kid, you know the drill, you come in, you go to sleep. Church is for naps when you're a kid. You know, you get dressed up and you go to sleep. But this one particular Sunday, my mother would not let me sleep. I remember very specifically, she said, "You're old enough now to stay awake." And so, God forbid, I had to stay awake while the preacher was talking. I missed my nap time. But it was in that moment I heard him talk about Jesus and how amazing Jesus was. And I was like, hey, I like this guy. What do I have to do to be down with him? And it was baptism. And so at 9 years old, I decided to get baptized. And then there was a gap. From about 9 to 17, I was in church because my mother was the youth, leader. So if your parent is you in church all the time, there was no not going to church for me. I had to be on every bus trip, every fashion show, everything the church was doing, I had to be a part of. But I got baptized, and then there was a span where I sort of left church. And I missed church. I watched my life being abundantly blessed, and I wasn't in church. And if I knew in my heart that if I wanted that to continue, I needed to get back with God. And so I began looking for a church, and I found the First Calvary Baptist Church, where I met my pastor, my goddad, who has poured into me in ways unimaginable. And that's where my call happened. Very weird, strange call. I would come to church every Sunday and cry. Now, it doesn't take much for me to cry. I'm the captain of the tissue team. It doesn't take much for me to cry. But this was profuse. There was an outpouring every single Sunday. And I would sit and I would look at an empty chair on the pulpit, clear as a bell. I remember the Spirit saying, that seat could be yours if you just do what I tell you to do. You're crying because that's where you're supposed to be sitting. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be up there. I mean, it was wearing me out every Sunday. And I was like, no, this is not right. This is wrong. Because, so the way my mom raised me was anything that I had a modicum of an interest in, she would push and encourage until I found the thing. So if I said I wanted to play the piano, okay, great, we're gonna get you piano lessons. If I said I wanted to knit, all right, I'm gonna get you some sticks and some yarn. My mother was really great at that. And so I've done a lot in my life in exploring my passions. And I was very afraid to preach because I thought people would laugh at me. I felt like people were going to say, oh, now she wants to preach. Yeah, she acted, she did all these, so now she wants to preach. And so I didn't believe, I was like, the Lord is clearly making a mistake. And I remember coming to my mom in the kitchen. I had not shared this with anybody. And I just cried. I just stood in front of her, she's cooking, and I just start crying. And she turns to me and says, so you've been called to preach. We had never had a previous conversation. I had never brought this up. She just knew. And she just put down her little spoon. She was making rice, because that's what we do. And she just hugged me. She said, it's okay. She said, you'll know, God will tell you what to do. You'll be fine. And that was my call. And I remember still trying to ignore it. And anything that had my attention at that time, the Lord took away from me. I kid you not. Everything. Whether it was entertainment, financially, all these things, I just felt stripped. And it was the same message. I can make all this go away if you just do what I tell you to do. And finally, I went to Pastor Jones, crying again, and said, I believe I've been called to preach. And he pondered, and then he said, you surprised me. He wasn't expecting me. But I remember when I joined the church, I remember him walking and shaking everybody's hand who joined the church that day. He didn't say anything. God bless you, son. God bless you, daughter. He gets to me, looks me dead in the eye and says, you better take this thing seriously. And I'm like, wait, hold on a minute. How did I get singled out? And on the day I accepted, I preached my trial sermon. At the end, I looked at him and said, is this serious enough for you? And And I tell them that occasionally. Is this serious enough for you? And the rest, as they say, is history. I just really like Jesus.
All right, so keep going in the story, because...
So then I preached my trial sermon on October 12th of 2008. Well, let me go back. So pastor says, well, here's two things I need you to do. I need you to prepare an Old Testament sermon and a New Testament sermon, and I need you to read this book. And the book was Christ-Centered Preaching by Brian Chappell, which you know is not an easy read. Right. But that was his way of vetting if people were really serious about this thing, because he would tell us it's a lifelong journey of learning. And if you can't learn, or if you're not willing to keep reading and studying, this is not for you. Right. And so I read the book. I came back to him with my Old and New Testament sermons, and he said, okay, now you're going to preach them for me. Okay, so he just sits in a seat in the sanctuary, no organ, no nothing, none of the stuff you're used to. Right. And you just sit and preach for him. He just sits and it was horrible. I remember the pain. He's going to crack up when he sees this. I remember the painful look on his face. And he said, you got the content. He said, that delivery is rough. And it was. He's like, you can't just read it. You have to preach it. And and then a few days later, I don't know what happened. It was like a button clicked, an aha, that said, oh, it was the acting. Mm-hmm. That said, okay, until I can be a preacher, let me go ahead and act like one. Maybe it'll catch up. And that's really what I did. I just pulled from what I knew. It was like, okay, if this was a monologue, how would I do this? And so my first sermon was You're Worth It, from the Gospel of Matthew, when he talks about you're worth more than a sparrow. And I remember that was the first and only time I memorized a sermon, because I had worked on it for so long. And I remember walking around my neighborhood reciting my own sermon back to me. And so when the day came, I knew it by heart, and it went really well. And so his verdict changed after I preached it, and he said, that was the best trial sermon I ever heard. So I had come a pretty long way. And then from there, just kind of kept preaching. He kept coaching me, teaching me, giving me tools, and really encouraged me to find my own voice. And one of the things I love about Pastor Jones is he always says the only way to learn how to preach is to preach. Yeah. And so I found myself preaching regularly on like an 8-week rotation at our church. And I really do love it. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I walked into this tiny church in Bridgehampton, New York. I felt like going to church. I was in the east end of Long Island, getting my home ready for my mother-in-law to visit. And something just said, go to church today. And I said, I know, I'm gonna go to that little church on the turnpike. And I went, and they did not have a pastor. Mm-hmm. Because I'm looking for, okay, now who do I give honor to when I stand up? Because you know they're gonna ask you, get up for the welcome. Right, so it's like, after God, who am I giving honor to? But there was no pastor. Right. And I've never done this before, and I hadn't done it since. I had given my information to the interim preacher at the time to say, this has got to be difficult. I'm an able-bodied clergy person. I'm always in the area. I never asked to preach. I said, but if you need someone to perform the ordinances or even teach Bible study, I'm available. Just call me. And by the time I reached the parking lot, one of the deacons was like, would you mind coming if we call you to preach? And I said, sure. And I did that for about 1.5 years, on and on, as they needed pulpit supply. And then finally, on one of my last visits there, they said, we're starting a search committee. Will you throw your hat in the ring? And I said, sure. And about 1 year later, 18 candidates later, I was elected as the first woman pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton. Wow. Yeah. Wow. And that's how it happened. I've been there now for 7 years. Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
7 years, the old line. Now you have the P in pastorate.
Just the P.
Right. Just the You've earned the P now.
I've earned the P. I'm going somewhere. Right. Yeah. If I keep drinking milk, I'll eventually get there.
I'm sure, based upon your gifts, you're further along than that. But that's the classical. So how would you describe your preaching?
I would describe my preaching as diagonal preaching.
Okay, tell me about it.
So a couple of years ago, I was asked by Hampton to explain my creative preaching process. And I felt like, a grandmother. You ask her, well, Grandma, what do you put in the cornbread? I don't know, a little this, a little that. They can't really give you a recipe. That's how I felt. I don't know, I just do it. Mm-hmm. But that question really caused me to kind of center down and think about how I do what I do. And I began to think about the cross and how we preach. So we preach horizontally and we preach vertically. We preach vertically to connect with God, Christ, and then horizontally the connection of community. What does this mean for us in community with each other? And so the more I began to do that, I'm just doodling. I was like, wait a minute, but there's all these empty spaces around the cross. Who's preaching to them? All these empty quadrants. And I realized I do. And so I was like, we can't just preach vertically and horizontally. We have to preach diagonally. And diagonal preaching moves right through the cross. Jesus is at the center of it. And that's how I preach. I preach to what I call the cracks, the corners, and the crevasses. That there's always someone in the corner of your congregation. Someone who can be seen but doesn't necessarily want to be seen. And then there are people in the cracks of your congregation. They're kind of the opposite. They can't be seen, but they can see everything that you're doing. And then you have people in what I call the crevasses. So I was like, you mean crevices? No, not crevices, crevasses, there's a difference. So a crevice is what you find in a wall, maybe like a little fissure. Crevasse is what you find on Mount Everest, where it's a black hole in an ice fall. And if you fall in there, that's it. You're never heard from again. And we have all three of those people in our congregations, the corners, the cracks, and the crevasses. And the way I try to preach is if I can reach you while you're in a corner, maybe you won't fall through the cracks. And if I can get you out of a crack, maybe I won't lose you to a black hole. And that's my preaching method. I call it diagonal preaching.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's as you say, it's creative. Yeah. And it's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah, and I also, it's patterned really after Jesus. Jesus was the greatest diagonal preacher that ever lived because he came very specifically and said, this is who I'm coming for. This one, that one, this one, and that one. I always say he had the worst trial sermon ever because he plagiarized Isaiah. But he said, these are the groups that I'm coming for. And so Jesus was very, what I've coined diagonal in his preaching. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm.
So what kind of sermon preparation process gets you to diagonal preaching?
So I'll be fair and say this. There are steps, but the main part of it is just divine. I have to say that. I'll literally go into these not that so Raven moments where Raven Simone could see things telepathically and she would just stop mid-conversation and I do that. I have a tendency to zone out when an idea hits me. And then I get a download and then I'm like, got it. Mm-hmm. And from there but there are steps. So the first thing that I do is what I call dump. Mm-hmm. If I have a thought, I then just dump everything on paper before I touch a commentary, word study, anything. What do I know about this? Mm-hmm. And that's where it helps to be well read and to read everything, from the newspaper to romance novels. It all helps, to comic books, which I'm a huge fan of. And so I just write everything that I know. What do I know about light? Well, I know that light can be laser beam focused. I know it can cut through things. I know that it can be fluorescent. I know it can be soft. I know that it can create shadows. Everything I know about light, if I'm preaching Jesus' light of the world. And then after that, I do a dive. Now I can go in and see what the text says about it. And there's always this magical moment where what I have dumped matches what I've dove into. Wow. And they begin to talk to each other. And I was like, I was on to something. And then after the dive, I want to kind of determine who am I talking to? Who's in this text? Who's in the corner, the crack, or the crevasse of this text that I can potentially bring out? And then deliver. And try to deliver in such a way that it reaches those people, the masses, those who are centered and those who are on the margins. Wow. Yeah, that's my process.
So then do you produce a written manuscript?
Yes, I am a manuscript preacher, and I really wish I could do it off the top of my head, but I can't, because I was Reverend Keelan Duke brought this to my attention. He said, you were born, or you were living in the golden age of hip hop, and you can really hear and see how that informs your preaching. I had no idea that my preaching was lyrical until other preachers told me. Right. And I was like, wow, you're right. I didn't realize how much I was influenced by hip hop and hip hop culture in the cadence and the rhythm of my preaching. And because of that, I am a manuscript preacher. I wish I could say I was like Jay-Z and it's all up here, but it's not. I need to write because words and flow matter to me. So yeah, writing is really important for me.
Usually when people, and precision is important to folks that love to write manuscripts, and the precision that you can get on paper is important. Not that precision is not important if you do it from memory, but it's rounded, it's different.
It is.
It's a rounded experience. The written manuscript is an exact experience, though God is able to bless and even whether or not take you off the manuscript, put you back in the manuscript, saying, so people sometimes equate spirit, because I walk up and I open up my Bible, I read the text, close the Bible, and then I just preach. That's spirit-filled. When a preacher shows up with a manuscript, that's not spirit-filled. Right. And I don't buy that.
I don't buy that either. I think it's quite spirit-filled. And actually, when I'm writing, there's a magic moment I'm always looking for when it preaches to me. And sometimes I feel like if that moment doesn't happen, I get very nervous. There's always a moment as I'm writing that I get overwhelmed. And yeah, I cry. I get overwhelmed, but it preaches to me. Right. And I'm like, if it doesn't put me in a chokehold, it may not put anybody else in a chokehold, but I'm always looking for that moment as an affirmation that says, okay, you're on the right track. Right. And writing it out helps me to do that. I also think that sometimes we mistake really good manuscripts or really good form or structure for good preaching, if I can say that. But I often equate preaching to how God created the world. It was void and without form. And that's how we come most of the time to a paper or to a screen. We don't know, it is all over the place, and somehow order comes. Just what God did. Took chaos, made order. But then God also made it beautiful. Right. God didn't stop at order, and I don't think we should stop at order in our sermons either. We serve a God of order and creativity. The God that says, let there be order, light. Ooh, I just made something really nice. Even God had to step back and check God's work and say, ooh, that's good. Like that's how we should feel about our sermons. I think where sometimes we can fall short is we do all the foundational and then never put any flowers on it. Yeah. And that's not what God does. Right. Yeah, God takes it and then adds a flourish to it and decorates it and makes it palatable and understandable for people. And we're called to do the same thing.
So you opened up the Gullah influence in your preaching. You opened up just a bit the hip hop influence. Yes. So I want you to say a little bit more about it, as we can identify. Those are two influences. And then I got another question after that. Sure. But open up the hip hop influence in your preaching. Sure.
So let me say this. I know we didn't get to the book part, but this is my one book recommendation. It is the best book on preaching that has nothing to do with preaching that I have ever read. And it's Rakim's Sweat the Technique. It is his autobiography. And my favorite lyricist of all time is Rakim Allah. He was way ahead of his time. He's kind of like you. You're right, kind of like the Rakim of preaching, if I may.
I never thought of myself like that. No.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to help you. And here's why. Rakim refused to change his style based on what everyone else was doing. Based on what everyone else was doing. So at the time he came up, you had LL Cool J, who was, I'm bad, like in your face and bold. And you had Run DMC, who was bold and loud. And here was Rakim. I came in the door, I said it before. I never let the mic magnetize me no more, but it's fight me, invite me to rhyme, can't hold it back. Look for. So he was smooth. And that's why I say you might be the Rakim of I promise you, in my next life, I need to have the coolness of Dr. Frank. It's just easy. You are, so when the Commodores wrote Easy Like Sunday Morning, I promise you would amuse. I promise. Easy like Sunday morning. And so he came and he refused to let, at the time, DJ Marley Marl change his voice. He says, no, I do this out of wisdom. I do this intentionally. He was a fan of Coltrane and jazz, and this is what people don't know about most hip hop artists. They think they kind of just like hip hop. No, they study artists and theater, and that's what informs their preaching, their rhyming, much like it informs us as preachers. I look at our arts as very similar. As a matter of fact, I love preaching song titles, and so when I'm doing that, I'll listen to the song over and over and over again, because I want the influence of that rhythm, that flow, that cadence. I think hip-hop artists are preachers in their own right. And let me also say this, which is suggested in a book, The Tanning of America. Dr. Damien Durr referenced that book, referred me to that book. And in it, they talk about, and Rakim mentions this too, hip-hop almost as a religion. And I know people will kind of get offended by that, but when you think about it, it could be a religion for a lot of people, and probably the most pure, because certainly something that's so inclusive of everyone has got to be godly, where everyone is invited into that space. And dare I say that we as African Americans, hip-hop is the one space we still hold the majority of the say on. If you look at everything else in America, we've lost a lot of our hold and our voice in a lot of spaces, but not hip hop. We're still number one when it comes to that. We're still the foremost authority on what it means to engage in not just hip hop, but hip hop culture, which has become a dominant world culture. You can go anywhere in the world and they will recite Biggie Smalls. You can go anywhere in the world and they can give you a LL lyric or a Queen Latifah lyric, because it's just that powerful. And so I think that's why it influences my preaching as well.
So what makes it so powerful?
I think it's the inclusion of so many people, with the exception of maybe the rhymes that, sort of harm our sisters. Mm-hmm. It tells a story. The brain needs a story. We love a good story. If it's one thing Black people are good at, is telling a story. So like 5 years from now, I'll be telling it was me, Dr. Thomas, we were sitting in the chapel and we were talking. We are the queens and kings of it was me, and we're going to tell who was there, and that's what hip hop does. It's real good hip hop tells a story. Let me take you to Marcy Projects where I grew up. Let me take you to the time, I left my wallet in El Segundo. Let me tell you that story of how that happened. Let me tell you why I'm angry at the police. It's often a political commentary as well. Here's something else I offer, pop culture. I'm a huge advocate for pop culture in preaching as well. I'm a comic book nerd. And what people need to understand about comic books and pop culture is they were originally created as a commentary on the political environment of the day. And so when Stan Lee creates someone like Captain America, it's not just for the sake of Captain America, but it's about Captain America. And now Captain America has to interact with this king from Africa. And now how does that work? When Charles Schulz, the creator of the Peanuts, wants to make a political statement on race, he invites a little Black boy named Franklin to the table to have Thanksgiving with the Peanuts. All of that matters, and it's relevant. The wonderful thing about it is it often takes very difficult political messages and wraps it in bright colors, and wraps it in warmth and some sense of levity so that it can be palatable to us. Even you look at Superman's story. He's the last son of Krypton. There's so many links to Jesus Christ in the Superman story, to where his father tells him they want to be good. They want to do well. It's up to you to show them how. So I find inspiration in all of these things. And I think when we limit ourselves to not just, but certainly books and reading and all of these wonderful academic resources we have. And it's great, and we need those. And we're preaching to a world whose attention we have to capture and keep. And it makes preaching more fun. It makes sermonizing a lot more fun.
So I've got Gullah, I've got hip hop sources for your preaching, I've got pop culture.
Yep.
All this you introduced when you first started speaking.
Yes, sir.
What else?
My own personal experience.
Tell me about that.
So I was honored enough to be invited to the Mixed Methods Preaching Conference. And I preached about Job's wife. Sermon titled, I'm Still Standing. And introduced that when Viola Davis played Rose in Fences, that maybe Mrs. Job could have been her muse. For a woman who knows what it is to stand under the most difficult circumstances in a marriage and stand anyhow. And I proposed that Mrs. Job has been vilified for all the wrong reasons, that this was the worst day of her life too. She had lost all of her children too. And she says a very unpopular thing. She encourages her husband to curse God and die, even in the midst of all of her pain. And you encouraged me when you said this, and thank you for that. You said that Mrs. Job is probably just saying what we all wanted to say. Like, we really do like to think we're more like Job, but we're really more like Mrs. Job, having those outback conversations with God. And her story resonated with me because in my preaching, this is another thread, I'm always going to root for the underdog. My friend, Pastor Cedric Rowson, always like, you think you can redeem anybody? And I do. I do. I think it's my job to, as a preacher. I'm always going to go the road less traveled. I remember preaching a series on David and Goliath, and I paused to try to redeem Goliath. I mean, think about it. You've been a grown man since you were like 3. There's some trauma attached to that, right? It's like, if you think about it, and if the science behind his disability is true, the suggestion that he had a pituitary gland issue, which means he was big his whole life, there's something attached to that. And if people are constantly exploiting you for being big, you're gonna be a bully. You're gonna throw your weight around because that's all people value you for. Right. See? That's the diagonal brain that says, no, Goliath is included too. Now, is he the champion? No, but he is somebody, as Reverend Jesse Jackson would say. I believe everybody is somebody. And I forgot where I was going, but my personal experience.
Yes.
I'm always going to root for the underdog. Right. And when I look at Mrs. Job, she's an underdog. What resonated with me about her story is when I was finally ready to go into commentaries, there were no positive words to be found. I mean, it was every suggestion from her just being mean and hating her husband to her being a gold digger and she was only with Job for his money and influence anyway. I mean, the indictments were horrible. And I remember sitting in the nail salon reading the commentaries, and before I knew it, the nail technician just handed me a tissue. I didn't even know that I was weeping for her, and I was weeping for her. And I said, not on my watch. We're gonna have to fix this, so that maybe the next commentary somebody picks up in the next however many years is my sermon to say, oh, here's a different outlook on this. And I also connected with her because of the loss of her children. As I suggested in the sermon, we always talk about, sometimes I feel like a motherless child, but we never talk about the childless mothers. Women who are, as I've coined it, fertility challenged. I had to come to understand that what I have is a disability just like anybody else has a disability. So I stopped looking at it as a punishment and started looking at it as a disability. and I could resonate with her because life still had to go on. In as much as she said what she said, potentially in her mind, she's still ministering to her husband in the midst of, while he's scratching, she's like, I need you to get up and do something. Because life didn't stop for her. She's still standing there with him. There's still a home to be taken care of. There's still things that need to be done. And I know that position. I know what it feels like to lose children and still have to preach on Sunday. I know what it is to have held your would-be son in your arms on Christmas Day only for, their birth mother to change her mind the next day. And it's been a long time of this. I know what it feels like to have those kind of things happen, and I have to minister anyway, because it doesn't stop. And to have to show up and put the shine on, even when I'm not feeling my best. And the reason I say childless mothers is because while I don't have any children to show for it, you can't convince me that every time I went through it, I didn't have a child. Even if it were just scientifically at that moment. They're real to me. Every one of them is real to me. And so that has been a big part of my journey.
Every one of them had a dream.
Every one of them had a dream. Every one of them had a name. I can give you the names of all of my children that were never birthed.
Can you name them?
Yeah. I'll give you two, if that's okay. Yeah. It might be Asa and Tirsa.
Okay, so tell me why you chose the name Asa and Tirsa.
So Asa is one of the few good kings in the Old Testament. And I've always just loved the name so that because of the name of a really good king in the Bible, it's just a strong name, Asa. A. Philip Randolph, the A was Asa. Okay. Tirsa is because of the daughters of Zelophehad. That might be one of my favorite narratives on women in the Bible. And the youngest daughter, whose name means delightful, is Tirsa. And so I chose Tirsa. But Tirsa also sounds a lot like Tisha. So I felt like, we could have a mommy-daughter thing going on. But then there's been Bo and Noah. Yeah, there's been several. I don't know how to be a cautiously optimistic person. I don't know how to hold happiness in. I really don't. I would like to say I choose to be optimistic, but the truth is I can't help but to be optimistic. And so imagine that every time this came up, I'm hopeful. And then it didn't happen. And I'm hopeful. And then it didn't happen. I don't know how to not be hopeful in these spaces. And so that's why I've named my children. Because they're still my children. And again, yes, every one of them had a dream. Every one of them had a name. Mm-hmm. Mm.
I am.
I'm good.
Mm-hmm. I think of August Wilson in a play from the Century series, and he talks about Aunt Esther, who is a 369-year-old healer, and he names the main character Mr. Citizen. And he has a play for every 10 years in the 20th century, and this is the first one. And he sets the scene that Aunt Esther, ancestor, is going to take Mr. Citizen on a voyage to the Middle Passage, to the Valley of Bones. And so she puts in his hand a little ship. Said, "Don't drop this, Mr. Citizen. No matter what happens, don't drop it." And then August Wilson sets the scene that they go down, and they're in the middle passage. And she says to Mr. Citizen, "We lost everything when we left." He said, "But you see them stars up there, Mr. Citizen? That's Cephas." that's my child Cephas, you know? And then she names 3 stars. I said, you didn't know those were my children, did you, Mr. Sis? I mean, so that's what I was thinking when you, the ability to, how can I say it? The ability to reach into the imagination, to name a truth in symbols that describe a feeling. So I was at Chautauqua and I was doing a lecture, and I wrote this, and the lecture was called The Gift of Black Preaching. So first I like to talk long on these, because they're here to listen to you talking to me.
No, I love hearing you talk.
So it was the gift of black preaching to the world, and I named that scene and the tears flowed. It was like the ancestors were speaking to me. It was like the way we could create imagination from despair. And so she takes him down to the Valley of Bones. These are the slaves that jumped the ship or thrown overboard. And it's a city, and he goes to the tour of the city. It's the imagination of it. And so I was just thinking theater, all that's connecting in my mind as you're talking.
It all connects. And I have to say, there's a beautiful mind. Now, when I say that, I mean like the movie when Russell Crowe was kind of in these visions and symbols and all these things. That's sometimes how my mind works. When I'm preaching biblical personalities, more specifically women, I am convinced that they talk to me. I believe they call out to me sometimes. Sometimes they're pretty rude. One such example was Elizabeth. I was trying to preach Mary. We were in Advent. I was really trying to preach the Magnificat. I was trying to do that. And the more I leaned into Mary, the more Elizabeth is like tapping the mic like, hello, excuse me, is this thing on? And she just wouldn't let me go. That whole scene of them coming together and her talking and speaking so highly of Mary and professing and preaching, and she just wouldn't let me go. And she said, yeah, you'll tell Mary's too. We'll get to that, but I need you to tell mine first. Woman with the issue of blood, same thing. I'm like, yo, you still pushing through, huh? So, yeah, they really do. And so you know how we talk and we say, when I get to heaven, first person I want to see, and this may seem really lame, but when I get to heaven, I'd really like to see all the mothers I preached about. And I pray that they will be happy and say, maybe Mrs. Joel will say, thanks, Tish.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is also August Wilson who says, I don't write characters, they speak to me.
Yes.
I write what they say.
Yes. Can you say this? Can you make sure I'm redeemed? Can you let people know that was a really bad day? Can you let people know, I only pushed through because this was my last, all of that matters. Right. It's almost criminal not to dive into their stories, right, or to try to put yourself central.
Or not allow them to speak.
Or not allow them to speak. I
can preach your story, but not allow you to speak.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
So I love the sermon. As a matter of fact, we should be able to put the sermon down in the description.
That would be awesome.
So they can click on it and watch it. But I love the sermon. I loved it. And I said this to you. I said I love the authenticity, the vulnerability of saying I've felt like a motherless child. And I was in the room with women who were weeping. A woman in front of me had lost her son, tragically 2 years ago. And when you start talking about feeling like a motherless child, she had all she could do to hold herself together. And so we came around her, and because it went to a place, it went to a place. It went into a kind of, you're describing the experience that I can't name, and when you put words to it, I weep because I can't name it. I can't. I can't, I maybe never, I've never told him about it. I felt like a motherless child. You know, I had a son. Mm-hmm. He was killed. Mm-hmm. And I haven't, but you're giving me language, right? Yeah. So my favorite, this is too much of me, but anyway,
no, it's not too much of you. This is not enough.
When James Baldwin died, Toni Morrison got up at the funeral, and this is my paraphrase, and said, he gave us language to dwell in. Mm-hmm. And it was so natural to me that I thought it was my own. Mm. So when you preach like that, you give people a language to dwell in. They got feelings that they don't know how to. And I was in the room. You know, we lost a daughter, lived 9 hours, and did, you know, her name was Ashley Ray. That's what my email's Ashley Ray, 86. Right. So that touched feelings that I had. I mean, as a father, you know, let alone what my wife had, you know. And I had to, what they did was they airlifted her down to University of Chicago Hospital to do surgery from out in a place called Olympia Fields, where we were at the hospital. And so they wouldn't let me get in the helicopter. So my parents drove me down, and then she died on the operating table. Mm. And so I had to come back to Olympia Field. I walked in the room, and so she knew it. And the tears. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell her, but my face said, our daughter died. So all of that, you don't know that.
No. And that's the beauty of preaching to the margins. You just never know who's in there.
It's the beauty of the authenticity and the vulnerability of being willing. And all of us can't preach like that. And all of us are not meant to preach like that. So it's not that everybody should preach like that. Right. I'm not saying to people, you're not authentic, you're not really. No, that's not what I'm saying. Right. Because it's a gift to preach like that. And preachers have different gifts. And so what I was hearing and seeing and feeling in the room is a gift that you have to be that vulnerable, to connect it to the text and then find a way. And then I felt you let us know that we didn't have to care for you because you told us that God, because sometimes you get that vulnerable, the people think they have to take care of you and they come to you, all right?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
No, but you backed it up and said, but me and God got this straight, you know, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. So it means y'all need to take care of me.
That's right.
Which is appropriate vulnerability because you don't want to bleed on the people, you know, and then if the people are taking care of you, it takes the focus off of off the text. So all that was going on in me as I'm sitting here experiencing this message from a whole perspective on Job's wife. So I thought it was masterfully, and I thought it was well done. And obviously, the response that you got after that message was like, what for you? Because I'm watching it, right?
So I think that my story has been unfolding for over 15 years in this fertility challenge space. The interesting thing is it's just really, unless you know me, coming out now because it wasn't time. If there's anything that I can thank this previous election season for, it was for letting me know it was time. Because there was so much talk around IVF. And as someone who's done it 4 times, I know the pain, physically and emotionally, of it. I know that partners and women who are experiencing it are not always in a happy place. I think that when people think about children coming, there's always a joy wrapped around it. But that's not the reality for everybody. When you walk into a fertility office or an IVF space, you can cut the tension with a knife. The expectation is it won't work. Mm-hmm. You never allow yourself to get as hopeful to say, this time. When you go through it enough times, there is no this time. And so I was just very careful about always, when does this come out? I know I have to tell the story because God doesn't, I don't believe you get anything like this and then you get to sit on it. You can't. Right. And so I said, yeah, I feel like it's time because somebody needs to feel affirmed and encouraged about what they're going through. And you're just hearing these reproductive words just thrown out into the ether like they mean nothing, but you haven't gone through it. You don't get to call yourself the father of IVF. I'm sorry. There's some real fathers out here dealing with IVF or the loss of children that you know nothing of. You don't get to do that. And so I think in some ways I felt like the guardian of it. Like, no, not on my watch. Okay, now I have to say something. God is like, you're up. And I think that's what happened that day. And so for me, the response has been, thank you for telling the story. Thank you for being brave enough to say that. Women coming up to me and saying, I just lost my son, or that happened to me. Thank you for saying that. This is more important even in the African American community because we're looked at as breeders. Mm-hmm. That's all they do is have calf babies. It's not the reality for every Black woman in the world. And so that in and of itself comes with a whole other conversation. Well, why can't you? And so the response afterward has been overwhelming. And yet I feel like I have nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. You know, I just feel like I'm the one who brought it forth, and hopefully I did it in a way that exuded emotional intelligence.
I want you to speak to, because you spoke to it in the sermon, the financial cost as a part of the story. Mm-hmm. So as we're helping people understand, you have to, so say a bit more, because you were very explicit about that.
Oh yeah, no, it costs a lot. IVF, in vitro fertilization is the full name of it, can cost upwards of $30,000 every time you do it. And you remember how many times? Okay. That's not counting the IUI. I've had 6 IUIs, 4 IVFs, 1 failed adoption, 4 unsuccessful surrogacies. And in the midst of all of this, every time it was attempted, here's what's challenging. I was removed from it a little bit every time we did it because there's a clock that's ticking. And so maybe for the first few times it's, your body can handle it, you're good. But then you get older and they say, well, no, your eggs can't do it. So now we have to have an egg donor. And then you get a little bit older and they say your body can't do it. So now we have to have a surrogate. And so there's a lot of layers to this. Surrogacy can be like $60,000, if not more. And this is without insurance, with insurance. So it's a huge cost to this. So when you consider Mrs. Job, who lost her whole livelihood and her children, like this is hard. And again, to be so callous to just throw these procedures around as though they don't mean anything. People experiencing them are going through real hardship, and they're going through a spiritual challenge. One of my biggest challenges that I faced, I remember having a conversation with my mother after one procedure and it didn't work, and I was just crying all the way home. And she got on the phone with me and you just sort of kind of talking me through it. And I had no response for her other than, I just don't know why I don't work. Why am I broken? You have to understand, Dr. Thomas, I have lived a very charmed life. There has been nothing in my life that God has ever denied me except this. That's a hard pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. Because you wrestle with, well, what's so wrong about me? That the Lord said, oh no, she can't, no, one is enough. She can't read. And this is the levity I've learned to find in all of this. But it's true, it's like, you gotta say, well, Lord, what's wrong with me that I can't? You say, no, there can't be another Tish in this world. And I remember a day, I think I had just gone through my 3rd unsuccessful IVF. I have to change my language too. I can no longer say failed. because I do equate this whole thing with having failed, and I need to reframe it and say unsuccessful. So I think it was the third unsuccessful IVF, and no one knew it, but I had come to church. My best friend knew it, Reverend Cherie Jones, and I preached. And after I came off the pulpit, you're in the back shaking hands, and a woman came up to me and said, "That was great, but when you gonna have a baby?" Not knowing that I had just had a procedure that was unsuccessful. And my best friend stepped in between myself and this woman and said, "Did you just hear her preach?" She said, "If you've heard her preach, you know she gives birth every time she stands at that desk." You talk about affirming. And to this day, she'll tell you she doesn't remember that. So I know it was a God move. She said, "I do not remember saying that to that woman." I said, "You did." So you flapped your coat and everything. You were serious. But it affirmed me. But more than that, it made me reframe this thing. I was like, wait a minute. I do give birth every time. Every time I write, I can assure you there's blood, sweat, and tears. And here's the thing, just a Black parenthood, I don't create them for me. They don't belong to me. They belong to everyone else. And so I'm sensitive about my babies. My sermons are like my children. I nurture them, I cultivate them, I do my best to improve them when necessary, and then I give them to the world. Yeah.
I want to ask one more question from the husband side.
Yes.
So tell me about the male side of these.
So here's the interesting thing. I almost can't. That's the interesting thing about this. I can tell you that, shout out to Deacon Larry Williams. I can share that it's hard, it's difficult. I think the most difficult thing for any partner is to see their partner in pain and suffering and knowing you can't do anything about it. That there really is no relief you can provide other than saying, I'm here, I'm sorry, we're in this together. Yeah. The experiences are very different. Yeah. I mean, incredibly different. And so it's really, and can destroy you if you're not careful. Yeah. And I even gave him the Cookie speech that Magic Johnson said Cookie gave him when she found out he was HIV positive, and he told her, "I understand if you want to leave me. I understand if you want to go." And she was like, "Boy, be quiet. Nobody leaving you." Had that conversation. "Hey, listen, you got a better shot at having kids without me." Knowing that it's my medical conditions that prevent it, that's also very hard to carry the weight of, could he have a much better life if he weren't with me? And I often say this in the Job. Whenever I talk about Job, I always say we talk in the church and we say everything attached to me wins, but we never consider what's operating at a loss because it's attached to us. Mm-hmm. Those who carry the weight of our work that never asked for it. And so, yeah, that I've had that I understand. If you want to double your chances, I get it. Yeah. That's a hard conversation to have.
And I think and feel, and thank you for the openness and the honesty. And I'm anchored back in my own experience that I support my wife, but I didn't know that I had my own pain. Yes. My own. Yes. That I grieved because, we had already had the nursery set up. I mean, we knew the sex, she would already, everything. And a dream, we dreamed a dream. Yes. Yes. And people say, well, you can have another one. No, yeah, but I had my own dream aside, so I was trying to be the husband that, cared for her and, I'm here for you, babe, and whatever. Yeah. And then one day out of nowhere, when we were taken down, so we had finally to change the colors in the room, to take close up the baby thing, close it all up. And the pain hit me like I had not even. My own, this is loss for me too. So I was, trying to lift up in some way that is devastating and it's not about comparing who's it more devastating for. It's like, we're in this and it took us 2 years to try again. We weren't even going to try again. It's too devastating.
Sure.
We can't go. You know all this better than I do.
No.
We can't.
You're right.
We can't go through
You
this.
can't go through
We can't go through this again. And then what's wrong with us? So they tell you, she was born with a diaphragmatic hernia, which is 1 out of so many million. And why it have to be us?
Right.
We tithe and we serve in the church.
Listen, it's all of that, because I thought about, you try to rationalize all these things that you hear in church your whole life. Okay, so I feel like I did it the right way. I got married. I got a good job. We got a home. We're comfortable. We're good people. So what we're like the poster children. We should be on a church fan. It's like that. And so you think like, well, if we're looking at it on paper, there's no reason. And then you hear things like a baby got dropped at the fire station, or worse, just left in a subway. And you're like, okay, so hold on. If you're not careful, you can get really angry at God, and I have been. And yet God is still God, and yet I'm still like, I'm not going anywhere, but I'm really mad at you right now. Yeah. Like, I'm still in this, and I'm still gonna preach, and I'm still gonna love you, and I'm gonna do all these things, but you gotta know you hurt me bad. Yeah. And I think we can say that to God.
I think we can too. I think that there's no real preaching. So it's like Frederick Buechner says it this way: we have to consider the absence of God as a part of the presence of God. Yes. That's the way he articulates. And if you can't, as a preacher, and his words deal with the absence of God, you can't fully deal with the presence.
Correct. That's so funny, because I'm working on that for 7 last words. Well, yeah, because that fourth word, I have so much angst around that fourth word. And so in preaching, what I'm actually actively working on is, what kind of thou is this that would, do this or allow this to happen. And we have those moments, because we love thy and thee. They do all the great things, but thou, that thou.
I hope I'm in the room when you preaching
that thou could take you out. It's like, wait a minute, we want thy leadeth me beside the still waters, and we exalt thee, but thou is the one that will forsake you. You can stop me at any time.
Because this is getting ready to, we got another 2 hours on this.
Yeah. But no, I just said it because you invoked that thought for me, and you let me know I'm on the right track.
Yeah. It's in Telling the Truth, Frederick Buechner. Yeah. He opens it wide, and it feels real to me. It feels to be a part of my experience. So I want to thank you just for going there and not only preaching, but how God uses these things. And we must need to go to Jerusalem. We have to go. And Paul said the Spirit makes testimony all the way up that it ain't gonna be flowers and roses.
It won't be.
And yet he still makes the journey.
Yeah, right, exactly. And yet we still do this.
And yet we still hope.
And we show up and we hope.
Yep.
And do our best.
So thank you, Mo. Thank you so much. It's been a glorious. I need to get my handkerchief and get my tissue, after the interview, because we went some spaces together. So thank you.
No, thank you.
And I think it's going to bless and touch a lot of people.
I'm prayerful.
And I think I'm also prayerful that it'll deepen some sermons.
Amen. Same. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. We've been giggling all day. I think the world of you, Dr. Thomas. Thank you for this platform. I think it was Picasso who said, in order to understand the art, you have to understand the artist. And that's what you give us in this platform. You help us to understand the artists so that we might better understand the art. And thank you for this important and pivotal work. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you. God bless you.